Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of the rating every world in the Spiral video. I would like to say I'm even more sick than yesterday, so I'm glad that I recorded this in 2 parts. So, what you're going to see is the second half of the video. I hope you'll enjoy, and yeah, let's get into it. Alright, next on our list is Wintertusk, which I gave a solid 33 out of 40. Wintertusk, in my opinion, is a really amazing world. And the reason for that is that it does what Grizzleheim was trying to do, but just better. For aesthetic, I give it a 9 out of 10. For music, I gave it a 9 out of 10. For storyline, I gave it a 7 out of 10. And for characters, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Obviously, I liked the aesthetic and music of Grizzleheim. Those were already high, so you take that and you just do it again. Obviously, it's still really good, and I do really like those. But it takes Grizzleheim and actually improves on what its flaws were. The storyline of Grizzleheim I consider to be pretty bad, but the storyline of Wintertusk was really good. I loved having to go to get the seals from each of the giants so that we could stop the Coven from doing the Everwinter, which felt a little bit more impactful here than in Grizzleheim, because in Grizzleheim we didn't really know what the Everwinter, we just knew that they talked about the Everwinter a few times. Here, we actually know that they plan on freeing the ice giant and then freezing over the spiral. Like, that's actually stakes, and I do really love that. I think it's really well done, and the storyline actually feels impactful here. For the characters, I had to give it an 8 out of 10, because the characters are all really good. Like, I love each of the giants and how they're each unique. Like, some of them are more warlike, like, but there are some that aren't. Like Suji, for example, takes the challenge in the form of words. Like, he gives you his word that he'll give you his golden seal, and you need to weigh his words, all that. I loved that questline. These three Raven sisters are all really cool. I love them. Honestly, they're just really good. And then finally, Grandmother Raven is obviously a really good character. I really like her. Overall, Wintertusk is a pretty solid world. Next, we go from a really solid world to a world I consider not so solid. Celestia has one of the lowest scores on our list at 20 out of 40. For aesthetic, I gave it a 5 out of 10. For storyline, I give it a 4 out of 10. For characters, I gave it a 3 out of 10. And for music, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise. I do love the music of Celestia. I think the music is really well done, and I think that every music in this game is really well done. I'll give it that. Like, it has good music, but the aesthetic, it's kind of gross in a few places. Like, sure, like, the Celestian stuff is cool. Like, the actual Celestian stuff itself looks really cool. But there's also the areas of the game, like, just look at Celestia Base Camp in the areas where it's not the Celestian stuff. Like, just this main area. It just kind of doesn't look good. Like, it definitely could use some graphics updates. It just looks a little bit bland, a little bit dull, and I don't really like it. The storyline, I gave a 4 out of 10 because this was like before Morganth was really a problem. We only really see her towards the end, and we don't even know much about her. The storyline in of itself, I think, is just kind of meh. We're just kind of going through Celestia saving the British people that, you know, like, are kind of invading and destroying these things. You know, that's beside the point. Basically, I don't think the storyline is that good. And finally, the characters. The characters are probably some of my least favorite in the game. Like, there isn't really too many good characters, I would consider. Like, what is a good character in Celestia? Maybe, like, the Archivist, I guess? Or, like, I guess Edith Benchley isn't that bad. But, like, a lot of the other ones are just kind of meh. Like, I don't really consider them to be good characters at all. Next up is Zafaria, which I have a much more positive opinion on than Celestia. For Zafaria, I give it a 31 out of 40, an 8.5 out of 10 for aesthetic, a 7 out of 10 for questline, 6.5 out of 10 for characters, and a 9 out of 10 for music. Aesthetic, I really love. I don't think there's too many areas in Zafaria that look ugly per se. Like, the Elephant Graveyard does look really good. The main areas look really good as well, very vibrant, very lush, and I do really love that in the world. The storyline's really cool as well because we know a little bit more about Morganth now, and eventually in the end we find out that she's trying to use, like, these words of power to, like, destroy the spiral or some crap, which is a little bit intense, not gonna lie. The characters, I gave a 6.5 out of 10 because there are some really good characters, like the Queen in Stone Town or in Younger White Stripes over there. really good characters, but there isn't too many that I would consider like near and dear to my heart besides those. There are some good characters, but not as many, which is why it has such a low character rating. And finally, the music. The music is really, really good in this world. I love the music. It's one of my favorite. You might have noticed in the last few videos, I've actually used the Zafarian soundtrack a few times, and that's because I love Zafaria. So, that's that. Next up, we have Avalon, which obviously is one of my favorite worlds, so it's going to have a high ranking. I gave it a 36.5 out of 40. For aesthetic, I gave it a 10 out of 10. For storyline, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. For characters, I gave it a 9 out of 10. And finally, for music, I gave it a 10 out of 10. Now, I would like to stress, this world would absolutely be my highest if it wasn't for one problem. One problem with the world that prevents it from being my highest. And that is the fact that the Sword of Kings is useless. Now, you may be like, Noah, why does that matter that much to the storyline? Well, to put it in perspective, the entire reason we are at Avalon, literally the entire reason, is to get the Sword of Kings so we can fight Morganth. The Sword of Kings is supposed to be this mythical legendary weapon that's supposed to be used in the final battle with Morganth to actually defeat her, because it's supposed to be so powerful. But what we end up with is a wand that gives like 40 crit, 20 block, and 2 pierce. It's an awful weapon, and it pains me so much, the fact that it's useless. I've redesigned it in the past a few times, but all they need to do is make it comparable to the Skyward Hasta, and people would start using it, and it would actually make sense. This would be bumped up to like a 10 out of 10, and I would love Avalon. I think Avalon is so good, it's just missing that one thing in the storyline that really would make it the perfect world for me. Obviously, in regards to the other things, like aesthetics, a 10 out of 10. I love the nightly aesthetic. I love the vibrant looking areas, the nice blue sky. Like, it looks beautiful. I'll give it that. Characters are 9 out of 10. I love some of the characters. Like Sir Pike Delago is obviously an amazing dude. You have like the Dark Knight, which is really cool a few times. The Lady of the Lake, which is really cool. King Artorias. All these characters really, really cool and really, honestly, some iconic characters. And then music is a 10 out of 10. You guys know I love the Avalon music. It's really good. I love the soundtrack. Let's move on. Next, we have Azteca, which has, I believe, our lowest score on this list, a 17 out of 40. So for the 4 things, I give it a 7 out of 10 for aesthetic, a 2 out of 10 for storyline, a 1 out of 10 for characters, and finally a 7 out of 10 for music. Now, I will say, I'll give them this. King's Isle, you can make a good-looking world. You can make a world that has amazing music. It's the problems in between that you have, right? Like, I will say, this world has some decent music. Not my favorite, but some decent music. And it looks really good. I'll give it that. But it also has a storyline which is really long and agonizingly boring that really just ends up with us finding out that Malistaire was back for a little bit. And the meteor is going to blow up Azteca. So, like, it's kind of meh. I'll say that. I've never really liked the storyline of Azteca. And then characters. I hate so many characters in Azteca. I don't know how they managed to make characters so dislikable. Like, I don't really even like Pakal, who is like the main kind of person we talk to in this, right? Like, I don't like the king, any of those people. And then finally, my most hated, despised character. I literally hate this character more than almost anyone in this entire game. Is Zen 7-star. I hate her. I hate the fact that she's on the Council of Light, and I hate the fact that she lived. I wish that the meteor, like, I would have let the meteor hit Azteca just to kill Zenzen. I hate her so much. She's annoying, she's unhelpful, she's stupid. I hate her. I hate her. I really, like, I can't describe how much I hate her. But I'm gonna leave it at that. She's just so annoying. I can't get over it. I'm just going to leave before I have a conniption. Next, we have Khrysalis, which I put a total of 22.5 out of 40. For the categories, I gave it a 2 out of 10 for aesthetic, 4 out of 10 for storyline, 9 out of 10 for characters, and finally a 7.5 out of 10 for music. So I will say Khrysalis, my main problems I've always had with it is that its aesthetic is kind of boring on my eyes. I really, really hate dull aesthetics. If there's one thing to know about me, I hate it when something looks bland or grayed out or dark or dreary for too long. And Khrysalis does just that. It overstays its welcome. An example of this, if any of you have played Skyrim, it's the Black Reach of Skyrim in Wizard101. It's where there's an area that just goes on for too long. Its aesthetic just doesn't look good, and it's just kind of like, ugh, I hate it. I wish that they, remodeled some of it, maybe made some of it a bit brighter. Like the last wood, if it was a bit brighter, would look nice. Khana Desert looks way too gray. Radiance Reborn does look really good. I'll give it that. It's probably my favorite area in Khrysalis, but even that looks a little bit boring in some cases. I just think Khrysalis is a little bit bland in the aesthetic. Storyline, I give it a 4 out of 10, just because I think a lot of it is a bit meh, and the final Morganth fight is just very anticlimactic. If it wasn't so anticlimactic, maybe I would like it more, but it just feels anticlimactic. And the storyline goes on for way too long, like 290 quests or whatever, is far overstaying its welcome. But in the more positive aspects, the characters at 9 out of 10, obviously you have like Devim, which immediately bumps up the character thing by a lot. Devim is a really, really iconic and good character. You have the Queen Sabina, Zaltana the Mirror Mask, all really iconic characters, all that I love. And finally, you have the music, which is really, really good. I'd say it's only not higher just because I've listened to it for probably about 100 hours of my life, and I'm a little bit tired of it, I'm not gonna lie. It's iconic, but not iconic enough to get like a higher ranking. But let's move on to the next world, which is going to be more positive. These last ones are all pretty positive rankings, and that is Polaris with a 39 out of 40. This has the highest ranking on the list, and it should come as no surprise. For aesthetic, I give it a 10 out of 10. For storyline, I give it a 9.5 out of 10. For characters, I give it a 9.5 out of 10. And for music, I gave it a 10 out of 10. Polaris has everything. It has an amazing aesthetic. Like, it looks beautiful, and every area in Polaris looks beautiful. The storyline is really, really good. Like, actually, the climax up to fighting the rat, which was really, really cool as well. Starting a revolution in Walrusburg was really, really cool. All these things, really amazing. And then we actually go to the Arcanum. I count the Arcanum as part of Polaris because it is part of Polaris. We meet the professors, which are all really cool. We go to the, we find out all about the Arcanum. It's just honestly a really cool area. And then we have characters, all really good characters. We have characters such as Ivan, Mallory, the Rat. We have the Arcanum professors, all really cool. And then finally we have music at a 10 out of 10. I love the music of Polaris. It's really, really good, and I honestly can't say more than that. Next on our list is Mirage, and it should come as no surprise to you that I consider Mirage to be a pretty darn good world. I put Mirage at a 35 out of 40. For aesthetic, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. For storyline, I give it a 9 out of 10. For characters, I gave it a 10 out of 10, and for music, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Now, I'm going to talk about characters first because I gave it a 10 out of 10. I'm going to say it. I love every single character in Mirage. The only character I don't like is Ishtar, and I can look over her just because of how good every other character is. Like, Ozzy is probably one of my favorite characters in this game. Snake Plissken is so good. Rocky Baboon, really good character. We have the Sultana. All just amazing characters that I love. In regard to everything else, though, the aesthetic, an 8.5 out of 10, it's really good. It's what I would imagine Krokotopia would be. Like, I love the aesthetic of this world, and it's Krokotopia, but good, which is what I think, honestly, Krokotopia should look like, is something like this. Obviously, the sand would be a bit brighter and would look a bit more Krokotopian-like, but I do think that Krokotopia, if it had an update, would remind me a lot of Mirage. Storyline, I give a 9 out of 10. I love the storyline. I've said it before. I think it's really well paced. It's really good, and I love the climax of fighting Grandfather Spider. All really, really good and well done. And the music is a 7.5 out of 10, only because it's not the most memorable soundtrack in the world. I love it. I think it's really good. It's just not the most memorable. Next, we have Empyrea, which is a 24 out of 40. Now, I will say it, I'm not the biggest fan of Empyrea. I never really have been, but my opinion on it has improved as of late. I think it's good, it just has some flaws. For the categories, I give it a 5 out of 10 for aesthetic, a 5 out of 10 for storyline, an 8 out of 10 for characters, and a 6 out of 10 for music. In regards to the aesthetic, I think the problem is that and why it's a 5 out of 10 is literally only half the world for me looks good. Like the inner and outer Aethanort look really cool, but I hate the Chaos Jungle. I hate Xanadu. The Nimbus doesn't look that good, and I dislike Aerial Shore and Aerial Jungle. I said it about Khrysalis. I hate bland and boring aesthetics, and that is what this is. It overstays its welcome. It's too long in this really dark and dreary aesthetic, and I just hate it. I think it's a bit boring, and that's why the aesthetic is so low. The storyline was just a bit boring. I didn't really like the finale of fighting the Storm Titan. I thought it was a bit meh. I think it would have been better if we fought like Grandmother Raven or something. That would have been cool, but the ending was okay. But for characters, there were some really good characters like Pork and Beans. We have Spark, then we had Grandfather Spider, which is obviously an amazing character. Overall, the characters were really good, and they made up for a lot of it. Khan was an amazing character, and made up for a lot of it, and it's one of the only reasons why I like this world. And then finally, music is a 6 out of 10. I think the music is just a bit forgettable, I'm not gonna lie. I do like the music here, as I like all Wizard101 music. I just think it's a little bit too forgettable. It's not particularly gonna like strike me as memorable, and I couldn't even hum the music if you asked me to, like outside of listening to it, because I don't really remember it. I just think it's not that good, and overall, Empyrea is kind of boring. For the final world on our list, we have Caramel, which I put at a solid 33 out of 40. I do really like Caramel, and I always have said I've liked Caramel. For the categories, I gave it a 9 out of 10 for aesthetic, a 9 out of 10 for storyline, an 8 out of 10 for characters, and a 7 out of 10 for music. I really like the aesthetic of this world. I think it's really good. It's well designed. Like, just look at the graphics on it. It looks really good. It's beautiful. Everything looks really good. I know a lot of people don't really like the childish, like, gummy aesthetic, but I've never had a big problem with it. I think it's fine. I think it's just, it's a bit jarring after getting finished with Empyrea, which had a very bland and dark aesthetic, to this vibrant, childlike gummy aesthetic, you know. But I think people are overlooking that this world actually doesn't really have childlike themes. It has some darker themes, like the horrors behind the actual process of like industrialization and stuff like that, like the people being exploited, stuff like that. Some really cool things to actually think about in the storyline, which is another reason why I give the storyline a 9 out of 10. I love that we actually fought the Aberrant Paradox, which was pretty cool, which was like us. Overall, I really do like how the storyline goes, finding out that Nana's just a little bit wacko and a little bit to not be trusted. For characters, I give it an 8 out of 10. There's some really cool ones, like Nana was a really cool character. We have Greta as a really cool character. Mulworth Von Trapp, I love him as a character. Overall, some pretty good and memorable characters. And for music, I give it a 7 out of 10. So upon rewatching this part of the video, for some reason, I'm very critical, and I very much say that I dislike the Caramel music, which just isn't true. I gave it a 7 out of 10, and I think it's a really good soundtrack. I don't know why I acted like I hated it for a minute, but luckily you don't get to see me just rag on Caramel music for a minute, and I could just insert this clip in here. Continuing on. But that's really it for today. I'm not really going to do Lemuria because I haven't finished it yet, but so far Lemuria is turning out to be one of my favorite worlds. The characters, I would already give a 10 out of 10. I love all the characters so far. You know, obviously I haven't finished the storyline and stuff, but it seems like a good world. So be ready for that when it actually comes out on the live realm. But that's it for today. Let me know if you agree with my ratings. Like, would you disagree with some of them? Which ones would you disagree with? If you made it this far in the video, make sure to drop a like, hit the sub button. I doubt many people did. This was a longer video, a much longer video, probably about 30 minutes long. But it was worth it to actually get this done, because I thought it was actually a pretty good video idea. So, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.